Lots of you will know me from my exploits on the athletics track, but when I left school, one of my first jobs was in the British Army, behind the wheel of a HGV truck. Quietly though, I've always had the passion for something a bit bigger.
I love vehicles, and what I've always wanted to do is have a go with one of these, a tank, the beast of the battlefield, and today I'm in it.
Here at Bovington in Dorset, it's not modern tanks like this I've come to see. Instead, I want to wind the clock back a little over 70 years.
When it comes to World War II, I think the history of the tank has been so overlooked. We always hear about Spitfires and Lancaster bombers. We never hear about the brave men that fought in the British tank battalions. Today, there's one machine that I want to look at, and that changed the course of the war.
I want to celebrate the Matilda, because for one vital World War II campaign in North Africa, the Matilda tank helped give our forces the upper hand and virtually ended the Italian ambitions in that region. It was a time when tank warfare was still in its infancy, and yet today the Matilda is virtually forgotten except by tank enthusiasts and the heroes who fought in them.
When I was conscripted, I asked if I could join the Royal Air Force, but they weren't going to have, they wouldn't play ball on that one. I didn't know a thing about tanks. Most of the training were done in trucks, and you went out on training exercises in trucks, not in tanks.
Before World War II, the whole concept of how a tank should operate on the battlefield was still far from clear. A Matilda Mark I had been designed in 1935 purely to assist foot soldiers. More like a moving barricade, it was designed to offer great protection and clear the path at the front line. But with just one machine gun, its firepower was very limited. However, by the start of the war, a new tank was in production, and this time it would be a fully fledged attacking machine.
This is Matilda 2. Much bigger, 27 tons, and as you can see, thicker armour and a very serious weapon.
Matilda II was an innovation that in 1939 kept Britain at the top table of tank power. This is just one of a few Matildas left in working order, exactly as it would have looked when a 22-year-old Morris Bourne arrived in North Africa with the Royal Armoured Corps.
By that time, I'd been put into a tank as a driver, and I'd hardly driven one at all. But there was a fairly simple thing to drive.
Its first real big test came in the Western Desert at the very end of 1940, during Operation Compass, a 2-month offensive against the occupying Italian force. The opposition was armed with 600 tanks, more than twice as many as the British. But the small Fiat-built machines were no match for the Matildas. The Italian anti-tank guns were unable to penetrate the 8 centimetres of British steel. The Matilda's 2-pounder shells, however, could deliver a fatal blow to the smaller Italian machines. In a matter of weeks, the British were able to push the Italian forces far west, out of Egypt and across the Libyan desert.
When it came to action, any action, of course, you were closed down, and the driver could see very little. He just had to go where the tank commander told him over the intercom.
It may not be 40 degrees here in Dorset, but today I'm privileged to get a bit of a taste of what driver Morris and his 3 crewmates must have experienced.
On the armrest, which is here, it's got a look through the gun down just here so they can see where they're going, which is, you can only just see. But this is where they put these shells. They would have inserted the shells in here. The rebound would have been just amazing. It would have been hot, sweaty, smelly. But I could not imagine what it would be like. It's filthy, it's small, it's claustrophobic. But they've done us proud.
With Matildas being the key attack weapon, Operation Compass was a complete success, earning the tank the nickname Queen of the Desert. But the Matilda's time at the top was not to last. Even by 1941, bigger and better machines were being rolled out on all sides, not least by the Germans.
The problem is with tanks and warfare is whatever you've got, I've got to get something better quickly. So the development speeds up. And what happens with the Matilda, the armour's very, very thick. And Hitler himself, he sees the reports of German rounds hitting the armour of the Matilda and bouncing off. And so he starts a programme for the German army of building massive tanks. He starts a thing called the Tiger programme, and that eventually leads to these whopping great things like this. This is a King Tiger here.
What, this? So they went from like Matilda, the tiny little thing, to that?
This is about 3 years later. This is the type of round that the Matilda II fired.
OK, it's quite heavy though.
Quite small, quite heavy.
Yeah.
But by the end of the war, you've got rounds as big as this. This is the round that's being fired by the King Tiger that we looked at earlier.
So they've gone from this to that?
Within 4 years of the war.
Amazing.
The Matilda II eventually became a victim of its own success, ultimately being outclassed by the bigger and more destructive tanks it had inspired. The days when 300 British Matildas could defeat a force twice their size were rapidly consigned to the past. The war continued on European soil, and whilst fighting in Sicily, Maurice Bourne was now up against the new German 88mm guns, the nemesis of all Allied tanks.
That we were overseeing an infantry attack on a wood, gun opened up. I saw a flash and came through the hull of the tank, went past the shell went past my ankle and bruised it, and into the engines and set it on fire. But unfortunately, the co-driver in the front was killed instantly by the shell going through him. Poor fellow.
I'm helping you all the way.
Before I leave Bovington, there's one important meeting left for me. But for 92-year-old Maurice Bourne, it's a very special reunion.
How old were you when you drove one of these?
21.
21?
Very comfortable. Never worried about things.
So you're 92?
Yeah,
you still have all those memories over 70
Well,
years ago?
you can't forget.
No.
Especially the salient features, you know, when you got a shell coming through the tank, sparks flying over your head, and leaping out a bit quickly.
You're never going to forget that, are you?
No.
Do you feel lucky, though, because there's a lot of people that
I
wasn't,
feel
right?
luck or something was on my side.
Yeah.
All the way through. I can't explain it, but here I am to tell the story. And I do honestly believe that there is something looking after one.
With heroes like Maurice at the helm, the Matilda made a key difference at a specific point in the war. Amongst the further horrors and the ultimate victory that followed, this desert story can easily be forgotten. But it's a story that I believe deserves to be heard.
Within months, Matilda's moments had passed, but it was long enough to stop North Africa getting into enemy hands. It was a result that changed the course of the war.